Welcome, film fans. Thank you for joining me for my review of Aliens, part of my Throwback Thursday series where I review films that I've never seen before, voted on by my subscribers. And this was done for Women History Month, and who is a bigger woman in film, and action film, and horror film than Ripley. So I was really excited to get in this one after only seeing one Alien movie before this, and that was the original. Is this the best sequel of all time? Was it a good idea for James Cameron to take over for Ridley Scott? I'm going to break down all that and the parts of the film. Let's start with the good. The first Alien was directed by Ridley Scott and is a sci-fi horror classic. It introduces a group of people who are just like us, normal workers getting into a crazy space situation, but it's so familiar and so down to earth because of the type of people that they put into the film, that once this unstoppable force comes in, that in the xenomorph, you can really just feel for these people because they're just regular people like us. But with James Cameron taking over, what he did here was introduce space marines and people who has combat experience, a more experienced Ripley who's dealt with the situation before and can consult, and something that was a little bit more action oriented. With the first film, it was all about atmosphere, waiting, not seeing it, and then when the monster did finally show up, how terrifying the situation was for those people. This one is more about preparation and them going in trying to murder all of them. So does that really work? Does that make this film lesser than the other one? I see it more as a companion piece. I think that with sequels, what a lot of films fail, what franchises fail, is that they keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, going back to the well and just trying to make that part bigger. But what James Cameron did with Aliens, instead of going straight back for the straight horror atmosphere, he expanded the scope of the film in every single way possible, and I think it was for the better. They trade in those likable common workers that we had in the first film and give us 80s action style space marines, and it's just so funny not only seeing these characters in this film, but also the way the elements are used: fire, water, gas, the earth, and the nature and everything like that used here, because you can see all the elements of James Cameron and how he likes to direct and what he likes to be in his script. Because all this stuff that was happening was like, this reminds me of Avatar. Obviously this is way before, but I can see where he has certain staples that he carries over in his movies. Titanic, obviously water is a big thing there, and in Terminator, the fire is a big thing there. So he has a thing about elements, nature versus machine and science, and he had a lot of that in here, and that's what he brings to the table that makes it different from the first Aliens. But also the way the Marines are in this felt very similar to how the Marines were in the first Avatar. Really gung-ho, really like, we're badasses, all really like pro-military, but the way that they're positioned in terms of how you're seeing how they're acting, they feel like arrogant dumbasses sometimes. I feel like that inside this movie and also in the Avatar franchise. So it makes me wonder, like, how does he really feel about the military? Because it seems like he props them up as badasses, but then he also positions them in a way where they're hard-headed and they're kind of dumb and they fit certain meathead stereotypes. And he trades in that atmosphere. Like, there's some remnants of the atmosphere from the first Alien in this film, but he trades that in for world building. We get a little bit more about Ripley and her character, and she becomes more of a full-fledged, fleshed out character. We get jumps 52 years into the future, so we get to understand like what's going on and how they got to this planet with the xenomorphs are on, and we expand on the xenomorphs. And I think the first one was only one. Now it's just so many in this film. We get a little bit more of how things work, and we get to see the mother xenomorph. All that stuff is really great and really opens up the franchise a lot. With Ripley waking up 52 years in the future in cryogenesis and finding out her daughter, who she was fighting so hard for in the first movie to get back to, is dead, I think that it created a very interesting through line in character progression for Ripley, because we got to see her be this badass, obviously, but we should see her be insecure and more vulnerable in her emotions and struggle with those things and understand this disorienting situation. The beginning of the movie is very disorienting, and I think that they did it on purpose so you can feel how Ripley is feeling, because I feel like for the first 45 minutes she was just kind of walking through this cloud until she decided to go help them on this planet, to help these colonists that are getting attacked by the xenomorphs. And one thing I think this movie does so well, that a lot of horror, especially sci-fi horror, could learn from this and show that this is the blueprint on how you do things, is make us wait. I think that a lot of times we rush into seeing the monster right away and seeing that first kill. And what this did really well was made us wait. I think the first hour 20 minutes of this 2 hour and 20-minute movie, we see no xenomorphs in their full-fledged form. We get hints of things, they're talked about, but they spend a lot of time with the characters, with the world that they're building, and what the mission's about. And it builds this tension like, okay, I'm kind of emotionally invested in these characters now. I'm super emotionally invested in Ripley already from the first film, but even more now because they've progressed her a bit and she's more of a character. They're so confident that they can kill these xenomorphs that I want to see what's going to happen. So by the time we get to that point where they first encounter xenomorphs, you are already immersed in with the characters. Now all they have to do is get into the action. And I think that a lot of action films and a lot of horror action films specifically don't do that. They rush into it really fast. You don't get attached to a lot of characters, and I think this is the blueprint of how movies should start off a little bit at least and then build upon. And after that first encounter with the xenomorphs and the way the Space Marines got completely wiped out, basically they went in there like 10 deep and came back with like 2.5. It was so crazy because they were bragging for like 40 minutes of the film, talking about how we're ready. We can do this. We have these armor-piercing bullets and all this jazz. And then they just were completely unprepared. The general who's supposed to be, or lieutenant, I don't know what his title was. I don't even remember his name because he didn't leave that big of an impression on me. But he was not prepared to lead them. And he was just so gung-ho and trying to stop the xenomorphs and get the glory that he was pushing his men into a dangerous situation instead of pulling them out like Ripley was saying. And he brought Ripley there to consult. It was just so frustrating, but I understood because we've seen these things happen in real life in other movies. What lesser movies would have done was make this about the Marines and Ripley and everything running away from the xenomorphs and things like that for the whole movie. And it kind of is about that, but the way they executed it was the best way possible, because after that wipeout of all the people, the rest that are remaining come together and try to figure out a plan to survive the situation, and we don't see the xenomorphs for another 20 minutes. So it builds up this tension again. So when you do see them, it's impactful and terrifying. And I think that the scene where they are all in the bunker together and they build all these barriers and they build these traps and the xenomorphs are still coming, I think it was the environmental storytelling and the sound design really shines really well. The red light blinking faster and faster as the xenomorphs coming. Instead of using musical cues to build the tension or build the fact that something's coming, they use the natural sound of the machine that is there, the beeping of it beeping faster and faster and faster, and it's coming. All that just that natural way of showing the danger really makes it a lot more immersed, and you feel like it's a realistic situation instead of just a movie that's trying to push you into the direction they're trying to make you feel. I think that James Cameron executed that with directing, and the cinematographers and guys did a really great job of really making me zoom in on the situation. For most of the movie, I feel like I was connecting to it on an intellectual level. I was like, oh wow, yeah, cool. I'm seeing all the 80s, like late 80s aesthetic, mid 80s aesthetic, the music, the way they talk, the way the Marines act, the hairstyles, the clothing, all that stuff. I was really connecting on that way. The way the film was filmed and how they kind of just jumped into things and how they take their time and everything like that. And it's not super bright and colorful. It wasn't until Ripley and Newt started to connect where I started connecting to the movie emotionally, and I was connecting to Ripley as a character, because not only was she a badass throughout the movie, but we got to see her nurturing side, which was really great. And how, she lost her daughter and Newt lost her parents, so they're kind of dependent on each other at that point to help each other. And I thought that was a really great relationship, and it was built out slow enough that it felt earned. It didn't feel like, oh yeah, you saved me out of this hole one time, and now you're my savior, you're my mother. I 100% trust you. It was a building upon it, and seeing that Ripley was the most capable person there. So I really enjoyed that dynamic and both their arcs and how they were dependent on each other, and that really got me emotionally invested in the film. And Newt was just a really great addition. She was this young person that you saw survive this situation, so you already know she's cunning and able to get through it, but she was also brought some lighthearted moments, some little bit of levity here and there, not comedy, but levity, where you kind of smile a little bit. She was super adorable in a lot of scenes, but she was like the ultimate scream queen. The way she screamed when things were happening was just like, it really brought the tension there. Is just those screams were crazy. I had to turn down my volume sometimes. She was really going for it. So I really, really enjoyed that character. And the action. This is a horror, sci-fi horror action film with, I think, the action a little bit before the horror. And I think the action for this time was done really, really well. Specifically that scene where they're waiting for that dropship to come and pick them up after failing to take out the xenomorphs. And then you see a xenomorph is actually on the ship already and it crashes it. All that was done really fantastically, and it was executed in a way that felt real. In a way, like, I feel like a lot of that scene is done in tons of movies, but a lot of times it doesn't feel real. Like, I felt the danger there. It felt like the ship was about to fall on top of them, and in the aftermath and how they took time to show all that was great. The Marines versus the xenomorphs was really, really fun. Them just shooting into the dark and trying to take down these things, and the xenomorphs kind of just popping out of nowhere, feeling like stalkers from The Last of Us. That was really cool. And then those final action set pieces with the Marines basically getting taken out one by one, and having that selfish benefactor who's just doing all the wrong things because he was being greedy. And I think he's a real representation of the United States, honestly, if we were in this situation. So all that stuff was great. Ending part with the mother xenomorph was intense and fascinating, especially with her, wanting to protect her kids and everything like that. I loved all of that. I thought all that stuff was great. It was a great mixture of really cool action and tying that action into the emotional aspect. It was like two mothers protecting a child, and who's gonna win. And Ripley won, and I thought that was really dope. I think everything about that third act was very, very strong and very, very rewatchable. And even though that this film basically switches a little bit of the genre from the first film, with that one being a sci-fi horror film for the most part, and this being a sci-fi action film with horror elements, I like that it didn't throw away everything from the first film. So it felt fresh, but still felt familiar because the tight corridors, the claustrophobicness of the area that because they're in a bigger area, but it still felt claustrophobic because the hallways were so narrow and there weren't many places to escape, and they had to barricade themselves in many places, and it wasn't like they could just run out into other places because the xenomorphs would catch them if they're outside. So I think that the environmental storytelling and the way the set design was done really well still kept the feeling that really Scott started in the first film, but just opened it up so that the action can be done really, really well. So I really, really enjoyed this as like a companion piece to the first film. I think they both go together really well. And it was like a lot of people question, is Aliens better than Alien versus is Alien better than Aliens? For me, I don't know. I think that it depends on the mood you're in. If you want something that like a horror classic, watch Aliens. If you want a really great horror action sci-fi film, you watch Aliens. And I think that they're really good together. Let's get into the bad. So the first thing I gotta say is the biggest problem I had is that I said that we spent a lot of time in that first hour with the characters, but the Space Marines just got on my nerves. Spitting the one-liners and all the things that they were saying, it just was really annoying at first. And I was just like, these are the characters I have to care about. If these xenomorphs come, oh boy. Like, eventually the movie did open up a little bit, but that first hour was rough for me getting into these characters. I was more interested in Newt and Ripley and the benefactor guy that I thought was a good person, but ends up being an antagonist himself. I was invested in more of those characters, and the Space Marines, I was like, yeah, I know all you guys are going to get wiped out anyway. This is about Ripley. So I was just like, yeah, this is rough for me, especially comparing to Aliens, where I liked more of those characters from the get-go in that first film. And compared to the first film, I would say that I think that the cinematography and the way the film is made is not as strong as the first film. I think they really built the atmosphere and the look of the film really well, and this one looked just a little bit more bland. I think that I don't know if that was the nature of it because it was a bigger scope, and it didn't, it wasn't as tight as the first Alien, or it's just that James Cameron's style just lends to it looking a little bit blander than Ridley Scott's style. But I just feel like it does look a little bit blander than the first Aliens. It's not terrible. It's still really good work, but it's just not as strong. And this one is the nature of them changing from a straight up horror film to an action film. The xenomorphs just felt more like regular animals than this unstoppable force of a creature. Like in the first one, I felt like there was no way they were going to stop them. So when Ripley did, it felt amazing. But the Marines started mowing them down like they were bears. And wolves, and it made them not seem as scary as they used to be until we got to the mother. So I do wish that they found a way to still make them feel as terrifying as they did in the first film, while also incorporating the action scenes. It just felt like they were using regular guns. I don't know if it's probably the limitations of the time and things like that, but that was something that kind of annoyed me a little bit. There's more of a nitpick. Let me get into my verdict. So I think this movie is the epitome of the blueprint for sci-fi action, sci-fi horror films. And if you're going to make that kind of film, you should look at this film and start there and then just build upon it and try to evolve it from the character work, the sci-fi elements, to the action, and keeping those horror elements in there. You can see the inspirations from all these different types of movies that I've seen since before I seen this movie, that comes from this film, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I think it's super rewatchable. So I'm gonna give Aliens a B+. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What would you rate Aliens? Did you like Alien more, or did you like the sequel better? Let me know all those thoughts and things about the movie, my review, in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you can be notified of my reviews, reactions, ranking lists, and my other Throwback Thursday reviews that are coming. I'm going to be reviewing the Evil Dead franchise leading up to Evil Dead Rise, so definitely hit the subscribe button so you can definitely check that out every Thursday, and you can watch more of my content right now.